Ladies and gentlemen, I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is September 19th, 2022. This is your daily Ukraine update, and we are going to be asking ourselves, does the Russian military still have command over its troops? Let's get into it. Okay, so first off, when we check out the map, we can see that maybe, just maybe, finally Russia maybe has stabilized their front line, i.e. it's more likely that, in fact, you can see here, there's no change to this defensive line here. Honestly, it's probably less a testament to Russia finally stabilizing its troops and Ukraine saying, stop, they're already dead. Oh, I'm going to get demonetized for that joke. The point is that Ukraine has probably seized so much territory that its command staff is probably saying, hey, listen, we really do need to consolidate this territory. We need to make sure that we are not vulnerable to counterattacks by Russia. Nothing would be more embarrassing for Ukrainian armed forces than to seize this tremendous territory, really validate a lot of their external partners who have been providing munitions and training assistance, and then finally only to see it reversed. So they are almost certainly going to be consolidating, redistributing their forces, possibly providing fresh equipment and new troops to forces who have had some level of damage or casualties, right? And are going to be locking this area down here. Now, what we have seen is that Russia has made some advances, and as we've discussed, it's been in a strange place. It's actually been up here in this sort of random, insignificant part of the line. And again, you can see it's literally measured in less than a kilometer of seized territory. And this sort of stuff seems really strange, given the fact that in the strategic sense, there's very little reason for Russia to be trying to make advances. They should be trying to shore up and stabilize their front lines here. They should be trying to dig in and fight the Ukrainians off in Kherson, where they continue to make gains. As you guys can see, there's still, Russian forces are still being pushed back. And so you end up with these situations where it almost appears like the Russians have more than one command structure. And when we break it down, we realize that may actually be the case. Let's explain. So first off, Putin is relying on more and more irregular volunteer proxy forces rather than units of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And this is probably for a couple of reasons. One, they do allude to the fact that Putin is probably pretty frustrated with the military command. He probably blames them for a lot of their losses, despite the fact that the largest failing in Ukraine is in areas not populated by conventional Russian Ministry of Defense forces, right? Most of the Russian Ministry of Defense forces, or at least their best formations, are down in Kherson, the 1st Tank Guards, some airborne units, and they are actually performing fairly well, right? Really forcing Ukrainian forces to fight tooth and nail for every inch of territory. But when we look at things like the DNR forces, the LNR forces, these irregular forces, all of them are more concentrated, right, in the Kharkiv area. And we can see how they've performed in the face of real cohesive offensives. Not great. So, and as the war drags on and Russian casualties increase, the quality of the volunteers and irregular units is going to get worse and worse, right? Russia's going to cut more corners on their training. They're going to look the other way on more and more severe problems. And when a unit, as they always tell us in the US military, a unit's only as strong as its weakest member. And you can imagine what sort of person you're getting in the weakest member when you're recruiting from a Russian military prison, right? So let's just break down who is in this sort of bars. One, there's a lot of reported hostility among all these different formations. Again, you have Wagner Group mercenaries who are not soldiers at all. You have Russian combat reserve. You have national forces. These are forces recruited from Russia's what we would consider provinces, so like Chechen forces, Tartars, other ethnic minorities within Russia. This is a breakdown here. Again, a Russian. It's a translated Russian language site, but you can see that they are from Russian, again, ethnic minorities, raising all sorts of different battalions. Right? Some regions simply aren't or refusing Moscow's insistence that they stand up a volunteer battalion, but the problems become the fact that when you have ethnic tensions among your volunteers and you don't have a strong military leadership or good training, you start to see some pretty messed up stuff. For example, one report says that Chechen leadership, when in charge of non-Chechen troops, will send those non-Chechens to the front lines and then commit the Chechens to the battle, right? To ensure that the Chechens themselves have lower casualty rates and that non-Chechens, other ethnicities, take the highest possible casualty rates. You also, of course, have the DNR and LNR forces, who Russia considers to be independent states, who have been increasingly unwilling to fight for each other's territory, right? Again, they have different levels of training, strange command structures, and different reasons and motivations to fight, right? Another notable, very interesting policy is, let's see, this again, it comes from Telegram, so let's take it with a grain of salt, but it does sort of align with something I would expect to see from Russia, right? You can see that in Russia, right, there's Wagner PMCs, right, in addition to the Ministry of Defense. There was also a failed Russian combat reserve project, something called the Storm Detachments, and they are considered assault squads of private military companies and get paid only for every square kilometer of liberated land. They've, of course, been nicknamed after a popular film whose name I'm not going to say on YouTube, but it's probably not meant as a compliment. But it would explain that meaningless territory is being seized routinely, even as the losses mount for Russia. So all this to say that one of the commenters pointed out, and I think based on this data, it seems like they're correct, that there may not even be a single commander still exercising operational control of their forces. The Wagner PMC might be fighting their own conflict. These other battalions may be fighting their own conflict with their own set of incentives. DNR and LNR forces might be fighting their own conflicts in their own regions. And instead of a growing cohesive effort, you have instead dozens of different units, different ethnic battalions, different leadership, all of whom are fighting in a lot of ways their own war for their own reasons. Again, guys, this is not the way to fight a successful war. This would work. This sort of decentralization is really effective when you're a guerrilla launching a guerrilla conflict or an irregular conflict against, say, an occupying force like the Taliban, and that's because the occupying force, if they take out one cell, they're not connected to the other cell. They don't know what the other cell is doing. But this, in a conventional conflict, this is a recipe for disaster. As we're seeing, we're watching the disaster unfold in real time. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. If you want access to uncensored YouTube videos, these are the combat video breakdowns that YouTube has decided to start censoring. Those are going to be on the Patreon. Link is in the description. Thanks to my Lieutenant tier patrons. I'll see you guys in the next one.